welcome back. We're here to continue public hearings on Bill 36, an act to implement budget measures and to enact and amend various statutes. Please wait until I recognize you before starting to speak. As always, all comments should go through the chair. Each presenter should also state their name for Hansard before speaking for the first time. The clerk of the committee has distributed committee documents, including written submissions, via SharePoint. As a reminder, each presenter will have 7 minutes for their presentation. And after we have heard from the 3 presenters, and I believe on the first one we don't have 3 presenters, but after we've heard from the presenters, the remaining 39 minutes of the time slot will be for questions from members of the committee. This time for questions will be divided into 2 rounds of 7.5 minutes for the government members, 2 rounds of 7.5 minutes for the official opposition, and 2 rounds of 4.5 minutes for the independent members as a group. With that, we will now have our presenters, and the first presenter is Nina Deep, the Ontario Road Builders Association.
Nina is an independent.
Oh, is an independent. Okay, now, so we have the 3 then. So Nina Deep is on the panel. The Ontario Road Builders Association, Adam Hurd, Director of Policy and Stakeholder Relations, and John Reddens. Are we all present? Okay, if we're all present, we then start, and each presenter will have 7 minutes to make a presentation, and then we will follow through with the questions from the committee. So with that, we'll start with Nina Deep.
Thank you. My name is Nina Deep. Good afternoon, Chair and Committee, and thank you for hearing me on this bill. I did not have time yet to prepare my submission for you, but I will have it to you by Monday deadline. I've been a real estate broker in Ontario full-time. I'm in my 27th year, and I came to mostly speak on the pension plan, the target benefit pension plan, and changes that I see here. And I also would like to speak on the tribunals and also the changes for properties. So the first thing I'd like to get right to the bottom to is the centralizing government organizations to one place on page 41. This reduces opportunity in jobs. That doesn't improve opportunities. That removes services from the people. And the second I would like to point out here is on the target benefit pension plan. The reason this one gets my attention is because I have followed the financial crisis, and I pay attention to when things get changed and amended like this. So what I see, what it looks like is happening here, to me, is this is getting reworked, and the people who should be benefiting from these pension plans, I don't see they're at that table. So these are the workers. The workers should have a say in what's happening with their pensions. I've been an employer a very long time, and I pay attention to pensions. CPP has grown since it came out in 1964 from $148 per year that someone would contribute, that's the employer-employee portion, to it's currently $7,000. So $7,000 is how much is deducted from someone's income. So that's one thing I notice here. Now, pension plans have left finance, and they've entered real estate. And I've seen this with, you see, the most famous place you're going to see this is the 407. The 407 in 1999 was handed over to CPP Investments, SNC Lavalin, and Fruvial. So that highway was paid for by the taxpayers, and it was sold to a pension fund and a couple partners. And the other place that I see pension funds where they've been very active in real estate is the Ontario Land Registry System was sold to a pension fund in 2003. So that's something something that I don't think should have been sold to a pension fund. I think that's something that should have stayed within the province. And since then, so this is OMERS owns Terranet, which owns the Ontario Land Registry system. So pension funds are not staying within their sector. They have entered my sector very fiercely. They have a lot of money, and I don't want their money in real estate. I've studied real estate for a very long time, and pension funds are not welcome here. I've actually written a study, the Generations Housing Affordability Analysis, which I published this year, and one of my recommendations is that pension funds should not be participants in the real estate model in Canada. So that's one point I'd like to bring about. And also Bill 23, which was here the last couple weeks, which I didn't get to speak on, although I wanted to. I registered to. So on page 95 of this report, it says community infrastructure and housing accelerator would not be used in the Greenbelt, maintaining the government's steadfast commitment to protecting this valued area. That no longer stands. So that is a concern that I'd like to point out. The other thing I'd like to...
Excuse me, we are doing the public hearings on Bill 30.
Yes, I'll carry on. The other thing I'd like to move towards is on page...
We can't entertain the discussion on a totally different bill.
This is Bill 36?
Yes.
Yes, I'm talking on Bill 36
Okay,
from the
very good.
bill. So page 97, I'm reading right from the bill. And I'm relating things to this bill. So I'm relating one to the other, which is appropriate. So page 97, it says here, protecting homeowners, home buyers, and renters, prioritizing Ontario home buyers. It says here the foreign speculators, that we're looking for foreign speculators, and that we've increased non-residential speculation tax to 25%. This actually does a runaround. The rules do a runaround. So over 6 units, it does not apply. Agricultural land, it does not apply. And apartment buildings, it does not apply. So this high tax not being applicable to what it should be is not helping. That's something that I noticed. And also, the federal government moves the goalposts. When we have a housing plan and the federal government adds 100,000 per year immigration, over the 10-year plan that we were trying to work towards, we're actually going to be short another 380,000 homes now because we have more population than we planned for. And the other thing is long-term care is absorbing our health care budget. We're building beds for private equity to run long-term care beds for us here in Ontario. So healthcare is being shorted. The government is currently sitting on over $2 billion that they haven't deployed into our healthcare system, which it really needs. And this shortage within the healthcare system is being paid for with the suffering of children. It's children that need this money in Ontario. This money needs to be deployed into our healthcare system. And long-term care beds, the private sector operating here in Ontario, long-term care beds, the taxpayers aren't interested in funding assets for them to run.
Left.
1 minute left? Okay, thank you. And then as far as the tribunals and how they're operating here in Ontario, tribunals have no role to play in housing or in workplace or WSIB. I saw there's changes here being made as well. There's been many books written about WSIB. Ron Ellis, for one, from UFT. He's a professor. He wrote a book about WSIB and how inefficient it is in serving people that need it. And ODSP being rising to $1,000, that's a very high threshold, and that's very high fruit that people that can't move or can't work, that doesn't help them. It also will not buy them, it will not get them any shelter anywhere in Ontario anymore. There's nowhere for people in Ontario on ODSP to live anymore.
Thank you very much. That concludes the time for the presentation. The next one is Ontario Road Builders Association. Andrew Hurd.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Andrew Hurd, Director of Policy and Stakeholder Relations with the Ontario Road Builders Association, and I'm here representing Kevin Matchey, our President, and Michael McSweeney, our new CEO. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My comments will be in support of Bill 36, specifically Schedules 4 and 9 authorizing expenditures, and Schedules 2 and 3 extending the reduction in the provincial gas tax. And at the outset, we want to thank Premier Ford and his government for these unprecedented levels of funding for transportation infrastructure. A bit about ORBA. Our association was formed in 1927. Our members build and maintain the majority of provincial and municipal roads, bridges, and transportation infrastructure across the province. The road building sector directly and indirectly supports 56,000 workers at peak season and generates over $5.5 billion in GDP. We are strongly supportive of this government's transportation infrastructure program. Most people take our transportation infrastructure for granted. They never think that almost everything moves by truck at some point. The foods we eat, the building materials we buy, the pharmaceuticals that our province needs, all move by truck. More than $785 million of goods per day move on our highways, making the transportation system the backbone of our domestic and export-driven economy. Infrastructure such as Highway 413 and the Bradford Bypass needs to be built as part of a multimodal strategy to keep Ontario moving. Investing in transportation infrastructure projects such as these will also significantly contribute to Ontario's economy through the creation of jobs during construction, connecting people to major employment areas, and attracting more businesses to the region. Think of it this way. If you're stuck in gridlock, you are contributing to GHG emissions from this congestion. Investing in transportation infrastructure is especially important in light of GDP growth expected to slow next year. Every dollar spent in construction has a multiplier effect and keeps people employed. It's also vitally important that the Ontario government start to plan for the necessary road infrastructure that will support the government's plans for the Ring of Fire. The road network in the north is not currently robust enough to truly fulfill these plans. Accordingly, we were pleased to note no change in the fall economic statement infrastructure forecast relative to the provincial budget. Bill 36 reaffirms almost $87 billion for roads, bridges, and transit over the next 10 years. That includes approximately $3 billion for highways and over $8 billion for transit annually over the next 3 years. It's vitally important for our industry and for Ontario that this capital funding continues to flow. And because the linear construction season in Ontario tends to only last 8 months, and it's shorter in the north, it's critically important that our members have a sense of the government's infrastructure spend prior to the next fiscal year. Any capital indicators such as these are welcome as it helps contractors plan their operations and capital investment for the upcoming season during the winter months. Municipal infrastructure projects continue to be of major importance to the operations of many of our members. When municipalities are in chronic deficit positions, capital transportation projects are often the first to be curtailed in favor of shoring up operational deficiencies. Supports like the $632 million joint federal-provincial assistance for municipal transit programs announced in this year's budget are very welcome. Further support from senior levels of government will be needed for the year ahead. In order to help deliver on these important infrastructure projects, the conversations we continue to have with the government on risk reduction are critical. Contractors are ready to assume risk they can control, and right now there's a confluence of factors that are outside of their control: materials inflation, labor, and supply chain pressures among them. On materials inflation, there is usually a gap of several weeks or sometimes months in the case of municipal work between bid submission, award, mobilization, and shovels in the ground. Within that time frame, the price for key materials may have changed, something we've seen a lot of over the past year and through the pandemic. Key materials indices serve as transparent mechanisms to ensure fairness for all parties and take some of the risk out of the process. There have been 2 indices in contracts for some time now that have worked well, and those are the MTO fuel and asphalt cement indexes. We would like to recommend that the provincial government encourage municipal governments to also follow this practice. We must ensure all ORBA members who bid provincial or municipal work are treated the same or fairly. In the context of the MTO fuel index, the proposed extension of the reduction in the provincial gas tax contained in Schedules 2 and 3 in Bill 36 is also an important component to reducing the cost pressures of our members, and we think it an important component to combating the inflation we're all experiencing should Bill 36 pass. And we are in the midst of exploratory discussions with the government on the creation of a steel index, which would, if adopted, provide more certainty and help reduce risk in contracts. We are pleased to see this government prioritize careers in the skilled trades. Construction, like many other industries, is in the midst of a generational shift. Investing in domestic support, such as the increased funding for the Skills Development Fund, and expanding the dual credit program for high school students, as announced recently, These are there are great careers in construction out there and many mentorship opportunities available. And we know that immigration is also a crucial component. It's great to see this government's efforts to have the OINP numbers doubled to 18,000. In the heavy civil industry, we are in acute need of general labor. As I mentioned, there are many mentorship opportunities within our industry, many opportunities for career progression. Further industry and government promotion of the non-apprenticeship skilled trades is necessary to help ensure the transportation infrastructure industry keeps up with the growing needs of Ontario. So on behalf of the Ontario Road Builders Association, thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you, and thank you again for the unprecedented and continued level of funding that is being spent on transportation infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We now will go to John Reddens, and I believe he's
I'm here,
Thank
Mr.
you
Chair.
very much.
Good afternoon. I'm John Reddens on the traditional territory of the Algonquin, and some say it belongs to the Mohawk territory. I'm a client on ODSP and consider myself as a political junkie. As well, you know, some will recognize me as a volunteer for the AMO conference here in Ottawa. My wife is a volunteer as well, and just recently won her two and a half year appeal on for ODSP. She had a minor stroke in between during COVID lockdown. You have to address the backlogs on ODS appeals. You did address the 6.5% of people with disabilities that work towards them with an increase in taking more money home for working. But we need that money now, not in March 2023. If you can give that raise to MPs in the last few months, you can move that quicker to the people with disabilities working. Pierre Poilievre made a motion in the previous federal parliament to get rid of take them all away, but you can give it, you are still punishing OW folks for waiting for their appeals. You are still punishing people with disabilities, living in legislative poverty. In fact, you have created a new pandemic called MAID. You have increased ODSP rates 5%. Inflation is running 8 to 9%, and your legislation said you'll match it with inflation every year. Well, this year you haven't matched it. Well, where's the match? The salesman pitch doesn't equal your legislation. As premiers, ministers, MPs of the legislature, answering emails to Ontario taxpayers is your job. Why are they not doing it? Legislation should be tied into the yearly allowance for ODSP recipients. Inflation should be tied in how much assets people have under ODSP. Populist ideology that people with disabilities are fraudsters has to stop. The mental health alone is hurting our community daily. I had an email from a family that a family member on ODSP received a letter during COVID lockdown in Brampton when COVID numbers were high, was putting their client at risk. The client has so much time to prove their status for ODSP, but the Ministry of Health was telling folks, avoid doing things. Why do you treat people on ODSP sometimes like garbage to appease a certain group of the government supporters? Killing the Greenbelt won't help the homeless when they can't afford rent regardless. City of Ottawa has increased their stock and hasn't decreased prices, but your sale pitch doesn't match the. I know landlords are keeping stock empty and increased values. I know landlords have torn down affordable housing, but have left the properties empty. How many MPs are landlords and voting on change legislation on housing? Isn't that a conflict of interest? Why don't you want to hear from organizations such as AMO, who represent most of the municipalities of Ontario except Toronto? My 87-year-old mother living in Northwestern Ontario in her own home still told me, to be honest, the truth hurts sometimes. My former counselor told me I'm brutally honest. Municipalities are still hurting from COVID. The government of the day called people heroes going to work every day using transit, but the sales pitch doesn't answer the need. Municipalities need the funding still for operations. While the Premier was on top of the Ottawa Citizen pitching for the former Deputy of Social Services during the election, people a couple miles away of City of Ottawa were still cleaning up from the windstorm. Nothing yet in the update to help our city. I haven't been feeling well with possible blockages in my intestine. I've been up all night before last coping with because I don't want to go to an emergency with wait hours to get my stomach pumped. The pain is so severe that it feels that I have blown appendix. What if it was? I don't want to be sitting hours in pain waiting for a doctor or nurse to become available. Ontario deserves better health care. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. And we now will start with the rounds of questioning. And we'll start with the independent member for the first 7 minutes.
4.5.
Yeah, 4.5 minutes, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Hurd. We hear about, often the increases in costs for doing large projects, and you've talked about some of the indices that you'd like to see included. What kind of measures do you think are necessary to prevent the kind of overruns that we see in other transit projects that do then, that protect the taxpayers? For example, we're hearing now that there's a 70% increase in the Ontario Line project, and the government's saying that's due to inflation and supply chain issues. Is that the kind of increase in cost that we could expect from projects like the Highway 413, and what kind of measures would you recommend to make sure that that doesn't happen so that taxpayers don't end up bearing that burden?
Well, I'll have to, thank you for the question. I'll have to defer to IO on the particulars of that specific project. But I can say that around the world, and I think certainly we know that construction projects around the world are facing issues of inflation. They are facing acute supply chain challenges. And in terms of specific measures beyond materials indices, I think that it's something that we're all grappling with. I'm not sure that we have the specific answer, but it's something that we're all looking at.
So do you think it would be wise and prudent for the government to include an increased amount for Highway 413 in this document? Right now they've planned for $25.1 billion over 10 years to support the planning and construction of highway expansion and rehabilitation projects. Should that number be increased by 50%, 30%, 20%, 8% for inflation? What advice would you give the government around how to account and plan for these kinds of increases that they surely know will be happening?
I'll have to defer to the government's expertise on this matter.
So you have no opinion on what kind of cost inflation we might expect on these large projects? Like, is there a typical amount? I mean, the indices you've talked about are, again, I presume they're tied to market prices, I presume. What kind of increase are those? What's the index right now showing on the is it the fuel index? What's
So the MTO fuel index is based on the rack price and accounts for the provincial tax as well. And in general, I talked about that gap between bid and award and then mobilization and shovels in the ground. And that's often several weeks, as I mentioned, in municipal projects longer. So at the time of bid, you are estimating the fuel consumption for specific road building practices. And then when it comes time to actually purchase the fuel for these activities, that's when the index kicks in. And so if it's going up from what you originally bid, then the owner pays the contractor and vice versa.
So what would, I guess what I'm saying is, what would be an example of a project right now that has that built in, and what kind of increase did that bring? Again, I'm just trying to get it. If you looked at the index a year ago, and then it had a contract had a clause to allow that increase for fuel, what would that be now?
Well, I think all MTO traditional tenders do have the fuel index applicable to them. I can't speak to the specific nature of Metrolinx and IO projects, but certainly the MTO fuel index and the AC index exist to protect all parties.
So do you know? Can you give an example of an indexed a contract that had the index, and what the increased cost was? Not Metrolinx, just a road project that you're familiar with.
So I can't speak to any specific project.
Okay? Thank you.
20 seconds. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll now go to the government. MPP Crawford.
Thank you. Thank you to all presenters for coming here today. We really appreciate you coming here as a witness. I'd like to start off with Mr. Hurd and your organization, representing the Road Builders Association. I wanted to get a sense. I think we can all agree that the population growth of the GTA and Ontario and indeed Canada is growing at a pretty rapid clip. We're bringing in more immigrants, newcomers coming to the province from other parts. And we obviously have a shortage in housing. I think we agree on that. We may disagree on how we solve that problem, but I think we agree on that basic premise. And I think the same can be said for roads in general, roads, highways, infrastructure, public transit. And you being specifically in the Road Builders Association, could you give us, the committee, some sense on how building of highways will help families, will help businesses, and has it kept pace with the population growth in the GTA over the last couple decades?
Well, I think in relation to specific projects like the 413 and Bradford bypass, we don't look at those as standalone projects. These are part of a cohesive multimodal plan, the Greater Golden Horseshoe Plan. And I think all elements in that plan are important, and certainly transit is of significant importance, but we can't build transit everywhere. And we are behind in this province in terms of having the transportation infrastructure, all modes, that we need in order to continue to connect communities and to continue to support our domestic and export-driven economy, and to further support social connectivity, as I mentioned, connecting people. So I think the multimodal aspect and the building of highways as a crucial component of that is of vital importance to encourage making sure that the province is ready for the population increase that we all know is coming.
Okay. And you also, I have one more question before I pass out to a colleague. You mentioned, you touched on the gas tax, which we are lowering for another 12 months. We know that the price of gas is not controlled by anybody here. It's circumstantial and it's a global problem. But businesses and families are paying a lot of money right now for gas. You're supportive of the government decision to carry that gas tax credit for the next year?
Yes.
Any particular reason why? What would be the premise for your support of that?
In our industry, fuel accounts for a sizable cost. And I'd be happy to provide you with particulars by submission deadline on the 28th, I believe it is, if you'd like. But as I mentioned, it is a significant cost, and any measure to assist all Ontarians with the price of the pumps, and certainly with a lot of construction vehicles. Many of our heavy equipment runs on diesel, but our staging vehicles and lots of pickup trucks and maintenance vehicles that are smaller operate on gasoline as well. So it's a vital component to making sure that we are able to continue the work that we're engaged in.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass it to my colleague from Mississauga.
3.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for letting us know how much time we have. First of all, I just want to say through you, Chair, I just want to say thank you to Nina, Deep, John, and Andrew for taking time and meeting us. These consultations are very important for all of us, especially when we talk about, we heard that over 500,000 people are going to be coming to Canada. Our federal government has intended that they want 500,000 people as a new immigrant. And typically what happens is, 60% love Ontario, they like to come, and I don't want to call end up. We actually want them to come. We want actually, with open arms, we want them to be here. So I just want to start with you, Nina. Quick question, and then I want to move over to Mr. Andrew on this. Question to you is that for this 300,000 people who are going to be coming here, how important it is for us to make sure that we get ready. They all need a roof, and we are already struggling with the housing crisis. So what's your take on that? What should we do?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. I welcome immigration. We need more people in Ontario. One of my recommendations for immigration is to have housing prepared ahead of time so that they don't. I helped house people, the Syrian refugees that came. I volunteered to try and help house them. They were in hotels and the housing just wasn't there. So I think that we should get the housing ready first and show that we have the housing and then welcome as many as we can. I want to welcome as many immigrants as we can to this province. It's a beautiful province and it should be shared.
Thank you so much. Mr. Andrew, the question to you is, you briefly touched upon, all these 300,000 people coming, they need the job. And I always, when we talk about the jobs today, we have a province who's actually having over 350,000 jobs going unfilled. And on the other hand, we have people. So people need jobs, jobs need people. Mm-hmm. So the missing link, as you talked about, is with the labor shortage, is making sure that we are there to help these residents. So you did talk about the skill development fund, how important it is, if you want to take a moment on that. But what I really want to ask you is about the portable benefit piece of this legislation. In your opinion, how important it is for our gig workers and other employees of the future, the portable benefits. So what's your advice to us?
Well, I think that in construction, and particularly in heavy civil, we are looking at both immigration and domestic support. I'm the treasurer of a group called the Ontario Construction Careers Alliance, and we are going into high schools, often with virtual reality simulators, and trying to break that stigma and encourage more young people to look at the trades. I think that there's a tendency to think of construction as this monolithic sector, and I often use the terminology that it's a bit like calling emergency services. When you phone 911, you get police, fire, and ambulance. They're all emergency services. They all do different things. And we have acute needs in heavy civil construction relative to residential and ICI on the general labor portion. So we have a lot of mentorship opportunities. We have a lot of opportunities for growth in soft skills in our industry.
Thank you very much for the answer. The time is up. We'll now go to the official opposition, MPP Fife.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to all delegations for being here today. First I just want to say, John Reddens, I do remember you from Ottawa at AMO, so thank you very much for volunteering there. I hope that you're feeling better, and thank you for speaking to the raised threshold for those 6.5% of people who are on ODSP and who can work. Perhaps we will get more people into the workforce, but addressing the legislated poverty is a key piece, so I appreciate you coming here today. To Nina, Nina, you touched on a lot of things in your presentation, and you could make the argument that anything that has to do with money is something that citizens have a concern for, especially in the lack of transparency in some of where the money is going, and thanks for raising the 407. In 1999, when the 407 was sold for, the taxpayers paid for it, $1.5 billion. It was sold for $3.1 billion. Its net worth in 2019 was $30.1 billion. So the taxpayers and the citizens of this province certainly lost out in that transaction. And at the time, it was one of the largest privatizations of a public asset in Canadian history. So thank you for reminding that, because it should serve as a warning, really, for a government that really is dead set on privatizing a lot of investments. But you specifically, to the fall economic statement, you referenced the target benefit pension plan, and I'm really happy that you brought that up, because it hasn't got a lot of attention in this discourse. And for those of you who are watching, which I know are maybe 5 or 6 people online, the target pension plans traditionally are just that, a target. And the target can move if the pension plan does not perform well, like defined contribution plans. It shifts the risk of the performance of the investment from the employer to the pensioner. So your concern, if I'm getting it right, is very similar to what's happening in New Brunswick right now, where those target pension plans, they're 10 years ahead of us, and now those targeted benefit pension plans don't cover the cost of living for pensioners. So I appreciate the fact that you've brought that to, and actually there is a court challenge around the target benefit pension plans, because the unions at the time noted that the pension plan model shifted the risk of bearing financial market volatility almost entirely onto plan members. And that's not the goal of a pension. I hope that you'll agree with me on that. So is your concern here today that because the Fall Economic Statement is setting out a framework, and it's actually on page 72, I think, is your concern that the target pension plans will move into replacing pension plans where one is currently offered by the employer? So are you looking at the displacement of those target benefit pension plans? And do you want to talk about some of your concerns as it relates to that question?
Yes, that is my concern. My concern is once it gets, because I think it's expiring in 2024, the way that they operate now, I think that once it gets it changed and then through regulation, who they're meant to, the pensions meant to benefit the worker. But the workers lose their power when they get transformed like this. The other concern, it's actually similar to CPP. If you look at how CPP works and how much control you have over that, you do contribute. Like it's a maximum of just under $7,000. When I got into real estate, it was around $1,700, both portions, employer and employee. So that wealth that is being used, it is unavailable until you hit a certain age if you live that long. But when the employers are, like, it looks to me like it's following a similar model, and the people who it's meant to benefit, the workers, will lose control of the pension and also the how it's invested. I believe that they will be looking to invest in real estate similar to other pension funds, and that type of investment is not welcome in Canada. I do not welcome pension investments in real estate. There's no room for that type of investment here. Real estate is meant for people to live in, not for pension funds to profit on.
Turn this on? Thanks, thank you. I mean, listen, the developers are doing okay in Ontario right now. I don't know if you've noticed. I do want to say that at the federal level around these targeted benefit pension plans, like the federal government started down this road in 2016. At the time, it was Minister Bill Morneau, and he introduced C27 to do this at the federal level. The move faced widespread opposition from unions and retirees, as it would undermine the worker security of the defined benefit plans, which was contrary to the government's commitments to strengthen retirement security. So, if you're looking at a society right now where the rate of inflation is, on the increase, the cost of living is really impacting people on fixed incomes. The retirees in Ontario and across the country organized against this bill, C27. So it is our job to get this information out to folks, because if they see that the government is going in this direction, this will definitely negatively impact their quality of life as they age. And this goes for all workers, I would say. And in many respects, they think of it as a form of wage theft, which I feel like you've kind of articulated already, Nina. With that, I think I can move. Do you have questions? Yeah, I'll pass it along to MPP Kernahan for the 1 minute.
I'd like to thank everyone for their presentations today and for coming to this committee. Ms. Deeb, I wanted to quickly ask about your recommendations regarding the non-resident speculation tax. You'd mentioned that it doesn't apply. You think that the government's fall economic statement doesn't achieve its desired results because it doesn't apply to over 6 units agricultural land and conservation land. How would you like that to be strengthened?
I think that it actually should specifically apply to these players and to these transactions. I think that it actually goes right around the problem, and it's taxing. This tax is only going to capture like a wealthy student that wants to maybe have a place, like an international student that can afford to buy a place. And that is happening because there's a shortage of rentals and housing. So people that have the wherewithal will just buy a place and pay the 25%. It's not a lot of money to them. But what it isn't capturing, it's not capturing the real estate investment trusts.
We'll have to finish this in the next round. The time is up for that presentation. We now go to the independent MPP Bowman for the second round.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, and let me add my thanks to all of you for taking time out of your days to be here. I want to come back to Andrew. Andrew, the ORBA has called for the mechanism to deal with inflation's impact on building materials. I wondered if you could, again, give some context around what kind of inflation we've seen recently in the cost of building materials. Now, we've heard about different things over the pandemic about the price of a 2x4 going up and then coming back down, and I could just give us some context around that, please.
Sure. If I can focus on steel, if you look at the American Metal Market Scrap Index, which takes a global view of steel prices, we see two big spikes in the last couple of years. And the first spike was during the pandemic, and then almost as large was the war in Ukraine. And so that has put significant pressure on steel globally. We've certainly seen that with lumber prices. We've started to see lumber prices come down. But also when it comes to equipment as well, if you order a truck at the beginning of the year, due to the shortage of semiconductors, you'll be lucky if you get that by the end of the year. And we know that in some cases, some heavy equipment manufacturers have stopped taking orders until they can rectify the supply situation.
So can you share like a scale, kind of just a bit of an example of the scale of the increase in steel prices?
I'd be happy to get back to you with specifics.
Okay, thank you. And could you talk a little bit, again, you look at a large project like constructing a new highway, again, high level, what would ORBA say about the percentage of costs that would be allocated to, labor, materials, buying the land? Like, is there again, rough scale here?
Thank you for the question. It's a very good question, and I will be happy to provide that to you and other members of the committee by submission time on the 28th. Okay.
Yeah, I'm really, again, just looking to get a sense for what kind of inflationary pressures that large mega projects like the 413 might need to anticipate, and again, what kind of increases to the overruns or potential overruns, or again, extra costs that would need to be built in. I also want to better understand, you've called for this mechanism to be put in the bill. If it's not put in the bill, what's the impact of that to builders, to the province?
I'm sorry, in reference to
the mechanism to deal with inflation's impact on building materials that you've requested.
So that is a separate conversation that we are having with the government, and it is at this point exploratory only. We're talking about the potential steel index.
Yes, I guess I'm just trying to understand. You've called for this, and I'm just wondering what kind of analysis you've done, and to show what the impact would be if it's not put in the bill.
Well, again, we continue these discussions with the Ministry of Transportation and with the government in terms of a specific mechanism, legislative mechanism, whether it goes in a bill or is determined outside of that. Through some sort of legislative or regulatory vehicle. I can't specify what vehicle the government may look at, but certainly we continue those discussions, and they're important discussions.
Okay. We've talked a little bit about labor and the shortage of labor. We're trying to build homes, we're trying to build highways. What's the potential impact to these large projects with the labor shortage, and as well as the training challenge, right? I mean, we know even if we have laborers available, they might not have the skills. What kind of implications can a significant labor shortage have on these kind of projects?
It can definitely be an issue, and I think jurisdictions across Canada are grappling with this challenge. And in Ontario, I think that the government has done a great job at sort of showcasing that there are careers out there in the skilled trades and in the non-apprenticeship skilled trades.
Thank you very much. That concludes the time for that presentation. We'll now go to the government side. MPP Guzenado.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask Nina a question here. If I understood you correctly, you said that you were against pension plans investing in real estate, correct?
That's correct.
So are you against the teachers' pension plan investing in real estate as well?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much on that. My next question is for Andrew here. Andrew, I believe in public transit, but I know that we need highways as well. With manufacturing coming back to Ontario and being the number one jurisdiction in the world to build electric vehicles and building the battery here, I know we need much more roads to transport the parts. We cannot transport parts on public transit. And that was the discussion I had with the Mississauga City Council at one time, because they were against building the 413. How would that 413 help us bring parts into our manufacturing facilities at Oakville, in Windsor, and across the province here?
Well, I think that there is, thank you for the question, I think that there is a major impact to not building anything. And we know that there is a cost in economic and social and in greenhouse gas terms to not continuing to build for the supports that we need for all of us as Ontarians and for the backbone of our economy, as you mentioned, primarily road-based.
Okay, and real quick, another part to that question. The 413 and the Bradford bypass will take approximately 10 years to build. Now, in 10 years, can you see those highways having 70% of the vehicles will be electric vehicles on those highways? So that those highways will be considered the first ever carbon-free highways being built.
I think it's a good point, and we've certainly seen the automotive manufacturers across the world really leap into to EV manufacturing in a big way. We know that there is a certain pressure on battery manufacturing as well. But as you mentioned, the highway that is being built and going through the process at the moment, in terms of what that looks like in terms of the environmental impact at the end and going into future decades, is certainly it's certainly actually exciting to think about what it could be with the EV infrastructure and the EV vehicles that could be on the roads at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And a question for you, Andrew. Welcome, actually, to bring me back to my previous career of civil engineer at the City of Windsor. And so just when you're mentioning the materials components and the asphalt escalation and price index, I can certainly sympathize with that. So just I got a couple questions for you. One is, do you foresee more volatility in the supply chain, the ability to procure materials for road building in the next coming years, or are you finding a stabilization of some of the sourcing? 'Cause, understanding it's been tough to find pipe, to find certain types of aggregate and other materials that goes into road building. I hope you can shed some light on that.
Thank you for the comment. As a non-engineer and a non-contractor, I'm going to have to rely on the expertise of my members to help me provide a robust answer to you by submission time on the 28th.
Okay, thank you. And just to follow up, I know most industry has been mentioning to certainly many around the table that labor force is a huge worry where our next laborers are going to come from, and that we've had a generation of young people, certainly from my generation, where working with your hands and working in trades has not been encouraged. And so now we're in a point where unfilled jobs are costing Ontario billions of dollars in lost productivity, and certainly I'm aware of contractors who are unable to bid on work because they cannot find the workers. So I was hoping to see if you had some insight as to ways that we can improve upon our education and skills development. Is there a greater role for the government to play in making sure that the workforce that you need to make it go and build what we need to have built sees the light of day, and that we can get back to a sense where the market's a bit more balanced and we lose some of the volatility?
Thank you again for the question. I think that there are a lot of organizations and some good government promotional effort involved in trying to bring people into the skilled trades and the non-apprenticeship skilled trades. But one of the problems we have is sort of last mile business. It's sometimes difficult to connect people that want to get involved with the trades directly with employers. And that's a discussion that we are having at the Skilled Trades Construction Advisory Council. Perhaps we can have a sort of a one-window approach to help bring people in. Certainly, there's a lot of work going on in the high schools and in settlement agencies in terms of trying to connect people to these jobs. The settlement agencies' approach for heavy civil is something that we'd like to explore more with agencies such as Costi, because we have a lot of people who would like to work and support their families, and they'd like to do that, today. So the only issue that we have there is we don't have a sense of critical mass, and so that's something we're working with settlement agencies to try and determine.
1 minute left.
Okay, thank you, and I'll be quick with this. So our government is looking at the portable benefits. I know workers often have to move depending on their skill set. Are you aware of any impacts that might have on the workforce that contributes to road building in Ontario?
I think, we are looking at a situation where we do have organizations out there that are bringing workers from Alberta to Ontario and workers from Newfoundland to Ontario as well. So I think portable benefits are certainly a crucial component. The nature of construction is that sometimes it is itinerant given the weather circumstances we face, and so having a strong portable benefits plan to further support workers is certainly a step in the right direction.
Thank you very much. That concludes the time. We'll now go to the official opposition, MPP Fife.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start this round with Andrew. Thanks for being here, Andrew. The labor shortage, thanks for addressing it. I mean, I have companies in Waterloo Region who are actually, they've hired an immigration lawyer. They've got 2, specialists in skilled trades, and they've gone to Portugal, and they're doing direct recruitment in Europe. And it's quite something that actually, they've just given up on things moving quickly here, right? So, I mean, there are some good things happening. I hope, my own son went through the skilled trades. I don't think people have an understanding of the time and the length that it takes to go through those training and go through the apprenticeship program. But he literally could get a job anywhere, and he's already making more money than me, which makes me very happy as a parent. But just to go back to the steel index, because I think that this could also be tied with interprovincial trade. I know that I've advocated for a steel company in Waterloo who has often, raised the issue of they want the government in some way to level the playing field, if you will, especially around steel. So you mentioned the steel index and the cost pressures around that, and that other jurisdictions have a competitive advantage. What is Orba looking for from the government to potentially, or especially around the supply chain, provide a competitive edge against other provinces?
Thank you for the question, and again, that's a question that I will have to come back to your office with in more detail.
You just mentioned, you were talking about specific vehicles. I just want the committee to hear what are some of those vehicles which would be helpful for Orba?
Well, I think anytime you're dealing with pickup trucks and vehicles larger, the computerization of those vehicles, the technology that's in them, that is certainly a significant issue in terms of being able to have those vehicles manufactured and into the hands of contractors to be able to fulfill the jobs.
Yeah. And so any other comments on procurement as well? Because procurement is an issue that I've been following very closely here about who gets contracts, who doesn't get contracts, how those decisions are made. And I would say a greater need for transparency around procurement. Do you think Ontario's procurement process for large infrastructure projects could be more transparent, more open, more clear?
So please forgive me, but I'm focused at Orba more on traditional tenders, so design bid build, and some construction manager, general contractor issues. So I think that those questions are certainly ones that the Infrastructure Ontario and Metrolinx would be more adept at answering than I can. In terms of traditional tenders, I can say that the MTO tendering system has been in place for many years. It is quite robust. And there is pre-qualification for contractors to be able to bid on projects.
Mm-hmm. I did have a private member's bill to diversify that procurement chain, though, so that companies who traditionally don't access government jobs could access that, and I definitely made an economic argument for that. So, it's procurement. We're trying to make procurement sexy again in Ontario, and it's an uphill challenge, I can tell you. Thanks very much, Andrew, for today. Over to you, MPP Tarrant.
So I'd like to, first of all, Mr. Reddens, I hope you're doing well. I'm sorry to hear about your recent health troubles. This morning in our committee discussion, we were focusing a little bit on some comments about family income. And I wanted to ask your opinion. Do you think relationship status should have an impact on the level of support you receive on the Ontario Disability Support Program?
Yes, it should be. My wife is actually older than me. She's going to be retiring in actually 2 years, and I'm on ODSP myself, and I'll be losing all my benefits because of it. It will affect me 100%, and it's just a disaster because you have a minister of red tape. You should see the red tape I have to go through to get me the stuff that I will lose out on when she turns 65. And when she turns 65, she has to fill out all these forms federally just to qualify to get payment.
Understood. And, one thing that we remain concerned about, we do believe that ODSP rates should be doubled, but also, on page 90, it indicates, and I quote, reforms are required to ensure that only those who need social assistance are the ones receiving it. This includes plans to enhance measures to deter and detect the abuse of the system and to maintain program integrity, which, unfortunately is a very judgmental and quite frightening statement.
It's a big myth out there that we're fraudsters.
Right.
And I'm tired of the communications about that. It's absolutely frustrating. People are getting fed up, and you're making them feel worthless. I'm sorry, but you're creating a new pandemic called MAID.
Understood. And, I do strongly believe you deserve to be treated better by this government. My next question, I'd like to just go back to Ms. Deeb. I just want to thank you because, I know from working with my local realtors that realtors are very well connected to their community. They understand the needs and the issues. I also, I want to focus on your concerns about what we've seen, the government's transfer of public tax money into private for-profit hands. Many I speak with are deeply concerned about this. You had some comments about the 407. And were you aware that recently that the government forgave the international conglomerate who owns the 407 $1 billion tab that they were owing?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I am aware, and also I appreciate the value as of 2000. Sorry.
1 minute.
The value in 2019 that was given to the 407 based on the 10% sale that occurred at that time, the value was $32.5 billion in 2019. So that forgiveness, that $1 billion forgiveness is it's even more injurious to the taxpayers because we're paying by the second, and it's similar to hydro billing now, like the 407 is similar. So on holidays, you pay different fees, and in the evenings and rush hours. So it's very financialized. The 407 is very much a financialized asset, and it's a large tract of land. It's 108 kilometers of land. So that's my answer. I hope that answers.
No, absolutely. It's. I just want to thank you for adding your comments. About TerraNet and the on-land registry.
Thank you very much. That concludes the time for this panel. So I want to very much thank each one of you for being here today to speak to the committee, and thank the committee for listening when I said they got to shut her down. Thank you all for coming here. We will now go to the next panel. I do also want to remind all the presenters the deadline for written submissions is 7 p.m. on Monday, November the 28th. So just because you've made your presentation today does not mean you cannot put more, if it comes to mind, into a written presentation, and it must arrive here by November the 28th. Okay? Okay, our next panel is Ontario Nurses Association Local 83, Rachel Muir, registered nurse, and Ontario Nurses Association, local coordinator and bargaining unit president. The second one is the National Chronic Pain Society and Leanne Corbile. And I believe we have both on the screen. So we will start the presentation. You will each have 7 minutes to make a presentation, and then we'll go to the two rounds for the panel to ask questions to use up the rest of the hour. And so we will start with Rachel Muir, if you can, from the ONA.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm here today as a registered nurse and the Ontario Nurses Association bargaining unit president at the Ottawa Hospital.
If I could just stop you for a moment.
Certainly.
I was supposed to say, would you please introduce yourself for Hansard to make sure Hansard records it the way it's supposed to be rather than the way I said it.
So my name is Rachel Muir. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm the bargaining unit president and local coordinator for the Ontario Nurses Association Local 83. So as I just stated, I'm the bargaining unit president at the Ottawa Hospital, and I'd like to say that our frontline healthcare providers and nurses are experiencing the worst staffing crisis on record, and there's no end in sight. Here in Ontario, the nurse to population ratio is 668 per 100,000 population. The national average is 830. We have the dubious distinction of having the lowest nurse to population ratio in Canada, and we are third from the bottom internationally. Today, a total of 25,000 nurses are needed to be hired here in Ontario to bring us to the national average, 25,000. As our population grows and ages, so do our nurses. 1 in 5 registered nurses are eligible to retire immediately, with another 1 in 4 able to retire starting in 2023. In 2021, healthcare and social assistance were the 2 largest employers in the service-producing industries, yet Ontario has done little to nothing to bolster them and even less to plan for the needs of Ontarians. You talk about the addition of healthcare workers and nurses without talking about the net amount. More people are leaving the profession than are entering it. In October of this year alone, here at the TOH at the Ottawa Hospital, we hired 36 nurses, registered nurses, and lost 42. With this loss of knowledge and skills, who will mentor and support the new nurses? Who will be there to ensure that there will be skilled, knowledgeable, professional nurses to provide the care to people of Ontario? Nursing students are entering the workforce ill-prepared. Lack of in-person clinical placements, mentors, crushing debt loads, unmanageable workloads, PTSD, all ensure our next generation of registered nurses will leave the profession prematurely. I'm hearing of third-year nursing students, who are halfway through their third year getting their first clinical placement. Next year they graduate. How is that education preparing them for their career? Since the start of the pandemic, verbal and physical violence has increased by 50% across the healthcare sector. It is not just the frequency that has increased, but the intensity. When did it become acceptable for nurses at my hospital to be almost strangled to death by a patient? When did it become acceptable for family members to verbally threaten my co-workers, stating you better watch out? When did it become acceptable for patients' families to harass, intimidate, and racially slur nurses at the bedside? It is never acceptable. But you do little to nothing to address this. And then there's the issue of wages. Between 2010 and 2021, male-dominated public sector workers saw a real wage increase of 6%. Registered nurses, a predominantly female profession, saw a decrease of 7%. In 2019, Ontario was the richest it has ever been. The province had more money than it had when Medicare was first implemented, $22.7 billion more. Yet we continue to see a decrease in program spending, a 1% wage cap on benefits and cuts to public health care, with Ontario spending 10% less than the national average per person on health care than any other province, something they have been doing since 2008. In 2021, despite increased revenues, Ontario underspent by a staggering $1.1 billion in health care. This is the equivalent to hiring 12,000 full-time registered nurses. Tax cuts, such as the 5.7 cents per litre on gas, are expected to cost the province $1.2 billion and save the average household, and assuming they have a vehicle, $10.83 a month. This lost income would pay the salaries of approximately 12,000 registered nurses. In 2022, despite having a surplus, inflation being at 7%, he decided against helping registered nurses and healthcare workers. Do you see a pattern here? After 10 years of cuts, a decrease in our spending purchasing power by 13.9%. Nurses struggle to make ends meet, to do more with less. To see no new money invested in healthcare in the full economic statement is pure negligence. Band-aid solutions, such as enhancing healthcare capacity in hospitals through the use of externs and unregulated healthcare providers, and 300,000 hours of physician coverage in remote hospitals is not a solution. Investing in registered nurses has been shown to result in better health outcomes, a reduction in mortality rates, and long-term financial savings. But money continues to be spent on infrastructure and beds. Buildings and beds are only buildings and beds with no nurses at the bedside to provide care to the person in that bed. My colleagues and I have a list of solutions to retain and support our healthcare workforce. We start by repealing Bill 124. Tackle violence in all healthcare settings by implementing all recommendations in the Workplace Violence Prevention and Healthcare Progress Report. Expand funding and access to mental health services. Return and reintegrate nurses back into the workforce with fully funded late career initiatives so they can mentor and support nursing students, new and internationally educated nurses. Increase the number of RN seats in the Ontario colleges and universities. Improve financial supports and provide stipends for clinical placements. Expand fast-track programs for RPN to RN and provide them with financial support, and stipend support.
1 minute.
To date, you haven't tried or implemented any of these solutions. There's no quick fix to this crisis, and private healthcare is not the answer. It will worsen the crisis, making healthcare less accessible to those who need it most, the sickest, the poorest, and the most vulnerable. Ontarians do not want professionals to leave the profession. They don't want increased wait times, costs, and morbidity and mortality rates. They don't want to see their taxes line the pockets of the wealthy as the wealthy look to profits over people. The solutions to fix our public health care system
That does conclude the time, and thank you very much for your presentation. We will now go to the second presentation, Leanne Corbile.
Thank you. My name is Leanne Corbeil, and I'm the Executive Director of National Chronic Pain Society. And we all know healthcare is a major budget item. And as Rachel started with her presentation, our doctors, nurses, and medical professionals across the board are burning out more than ever now. Pre-pandemic, it just continued to get worse through the pandemic, and even more so now, with our ER times upwards of 20 hours in some hospitals. The beds just aren't available, and backups with imaging, testing, and all of that are creating a lot of backlogs. In Ontario, we have over 3.5 million people suffering from chronic pain. Often chronic pain sufferers have a stigma attached to them, and with that stigma, it's often difficult for them to access the care they need. Quite often, they end up turning to the emergency rooms and creating an extra backlog there. We are lucky in Ontario that we have at least 400 chronic pain specialists, but as we've heard, is the government wants to change that. They want to reduce the amount of care that a chronic pain specialist can provide, as well as the number of nerve blocks a patient can receive. We understand that nerve blocks is a big expense in Ontario on our healthcare system. However, without nerve blocks, we would be putting a extra workload back into the emergency rooms, where the average emergency room visit is over $300. And if patients aren't able to access this care through chronic pain specialists, they will be forced to go to the emergency room, adding to the backlogs, adding to the expense. Whereas the highest visit for a patient seeing a chronic pain specialist is $200 versus an average of over $300. And with these visits, if patients are being forced to the emergency rooms, there's certain things that the ER doctors would have to be doing each time that patient walks through the doors. Like, if a patient enters with low back pain, because it's a new visit to that physician, they'd have to order a urine test to make sure there's no kidney stones, no kidney infections, to clear them before they can even treat the low back pain. Whereas if they're continuing to see a chronic pain specialist, they don't have to do those tests as frequently. They're on top of their care. They see them, keeping, again, the patient per visits lower. So our biggest concern here is we're advocating for those patients suffering from chronic pain that rely on nerve blocks to get them through their daily living, to allow many to continue to work and not have to resort to ODSP, and to keep them out of their family physician's office, again, receiving narcotics and other modes of treatments that are more addicting and harmful, not only to them as a person, but us as a society. And again, going back to keeping these people out of the emergency rooms where they don't need emergency treatment, they need pain control. And with only less than 200 hospitals in Ontario, we can't afford to keep pushing these patients to the emergency room. I have a nice short presentation today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you both for the presentation. We will then now start the round with, we'll start with the government. The first round, we have MP. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. There you go.
Thank you, Chair. Do you want me to give you just a short lesson? It's Triantafilopoulos.
MPPT.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you very much to both presenters for joining us today. I know that you gave us a lot of very, very important and valuable information. And I just want you to know that we, on the government side, do believe you are dedicated. All of our healthcare workers in Ontario are really the lifeblood of our province's healthcare system. And we would not have been able to get through the COVID pandemic with all of you doing more than 100% in order to ensure our population was safe and well cared for. And to that, I want to add that our government has really been rebuilding our healthcare system. It's a system we inherited that we know was badly in need of vital investments. And in August of this year, our Minister of Finance invested $5.6 billion more in health, and that was on top of the $5 billion that we put into it last year. We know that in all sectors, whether it's personal support workers, nurses, RPNs, our medical professionals, all of you have been doing more than your share, and we will have your backs. We are supporting you with the vital investments that we have going forward. You know, on the issue that I believe it was, I think it might have been Rachel, you mentioned our investments with respect to nurses. You must know that our government has continued to work with our colleges and our universities to ensure that we have a robust curriculum in order to recruit and hire and create incentives for nurses, in fact, for more nurses to graduate. We've also announced that we will have 3 new medical schools that will be built in the coming years. And so one of the programs I'd like to mention to you is the Learn and Stay grant program for 2,500 eligible students who then are able to work in underserviced communities after graduation. We know that's important, particularly in rural and northern communities. As well, another program, March 2020, we expanded the Community Commitment Program, which provides $25,000 as an incentive for 3,000 nurses who commit to working in underserviced hospitals, long-term care homes, and home care agencies for 2 years. All of these programs, in addition to more that we've announced, are there to be able to stabilize our current healthcare workforce and really build to have the kind of healthcare system that is publicly financed and publicly owned, not privately owned, in the province of Ontario. So I'd really appreciate it if you could both comment on this. Rachel, do you want to go first? Might they be muted?
Thank you. Okay, so to address a couple of things that were brought forward, the grants for 2,500 students, that's all students, not just nursing students. So while it is a drop in the bucket, it is definitely not sufficient. Our nursing students, when they reach their consolidation or for any of their in-person clinical rotations, they are no longer able to work, which is why they need support there. Their fees are astronomical. They're coming out of university with debt loads of a minimum of $50,000. They're coming to a profession where they're expected to work 16-plus hour shifts because the unit they are working on is short 3, 4, 5, in emergency units from my hospital, 15 nurses on a shift. This is not sustainable. So we need to address the root cause, and these are Band-Aid solutions again. We've reached out frequently to offer solutions that can be worked with, that can be used together, that can be worked on together to fix this problem, and yet no attempt has been made to speak with us about this. We're the frontline workers. We know what will work. As I said in my presentation, infrastructure is wonderful. We all recognize that we need new infrastructure. However, it's useless to us if you don't have nurses, healthcare providers to look after the person in that bed. It just becomes a pretty new bed in a pretty new building because there's no qualified, professional, experienced healthcare providers there to do what is needed to be done.
Would Leanne wish to comment before I ask my next question?
Thank you. I just wanted to point out there may have been some money put into healthcare, but when it comes to chronic pain sufferers, it seems like money keeps coming out of those services. You know, back when OHIP was covering physiotherapy and things like that, and then that was delisted, and now the discussion of nerve blocks being reduced drastically as well. So my focus is making sure that there's still services available under the OHIP service coverage for these patients with chronic pain.
Thank you for that. What I do is acknowledge and support that infrastructure is not enough. We in fact have to work on all fronts going forward, and that is in fact what our government has been doing. Not only have we been investing in the bricks and mortar of adding investments to building more hospitals, we're also investing, as you know, heavily in terms of building more long-term care homes. When we came in as a government 4 years ago, in the previous 8 years, the previous government had only built 611 new net beds in the entire province of Ontario. What we have actually done, even during a pandemic, is we're working on building 30,000 new long-term care beds and an additional 22,000 redeveloped beds. That is massive infrastructure, but at the same time, we're also investing in making sure we have the nurses, that we have the PSWs, that we have all manner of healthcare allied professionals working alongside those workers to make sure that our seniors, in particular in long-term care, get the quality care they need during their elderly years. We're investing in 4 hours of direct care, which was a promise the previous government had made for years and never implemented. So I share with you that, in fact, this government is listening and doing all of the necessary investments we need. I'd be happy to meet with you at any time if you'd like, if you'd like to for me to be able to listen to your concerns.
Thank you very much. Your time has lapsed. The official opposition.
Thank you, Chair.
MPP 5.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for coming in and speaking truth to power, and for Leanne for fighting for more options for to address chronic pain. I'm going to start with you, Rachel. When we raise the issues, like you actually described in your presentation that this is the worst staffing crisis on record in your experience at the Ottawa Hospital. When we tell the Minister of Health in question period and we ask her about specific issues, she says to us they have a plan and the plan is working. What do you say to the Minister of Health when she says that to all of us?
The plan is not working, and I have yet to see a plan.
Okay.
What I see on a daily basis is nurses leaving. Nurses who have a month. I have nurses who are leaving the profession without even completing their orientation, because they see what they are going to be faced with and cannot do it. And I have nurses in their cars crying before they come into a shift or after they leave a shift.
Okay. And then the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Health says she's tired of hearing about this crisis. When the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Health says that she's tired of hearing these real life stories about what's happening in our healthcare system, what does that do to morale for hospital and healthcare workers in your settings?
It does nothing for morale. In my 35 years of nursing, I have never seen morale this low. And just when I think it can get no lower, we hear comments like this.
Yeah.
We know what it's like on the front line, and our morale actually gets lower, and we see more nurses leave.
Okay. And when the Premier of the province says to Ontarians, to citizens, that what's happening in our hospitals is not about money, it's not about resource allocation. He said this on several occasions, and yet we know, like last night in Hamilton, the Children's Hospital, they're now operating at 143%, and only 1/4 of their beds are funded. So what do you say? I mean, we have been trying to get the government to repeal Bill 124. They are stubbornly attached to this wage suppression legislation, which is driving nurses out of the province. What do you say to the Premier when he says this isn't about resources? It's not about investing in healthcare. What do you say to him?
It absolutely is about resources. It's about health, human resources.
That's right. Yeah.
That's what it's about. We are losing them. I mean, just as I've said, just to bring us up to the national average, we need 25,000 nurses.
Yeah. Yeah. So you made some very good points. I mean, because we've been trying to track how many nurses are leaving Ontario, right? And the Ministry of Health is not clear or transparent on this. But in your presentation, you said you've brought in 28 new nurses, new RNs, I believe, or RPNs or RNs, but you've lost 42. So
yes, in 1 month alone, the TOH hired 36 new registered nurses.
Yeah.
But we lost 42.
Yeah. So, and the important part about that, I think you tried to get at in your presentation, is that that's a loss of knowledge and of experience and ability to mentor. Now, can you speak to the prevalence of agency nurses? Because some hospitals have not been able to attract RPNs or RNs into their settings, and then they've had to go outside to these private agencies where they are paying, where we all pay for it. I just want to say, like, the government says this is all publicly delivered. However, it's the taxpayer pays the extra money for those private agency nurses. Do you have any experiences of that in your hospital?
So, up to now, we've managed to keep it to a minimum.
Okay.
But it's just a matter of time before that changes.
Yeah. What does it say when you have an agency nurse who's, say, making $85 an hour versus a full-time nurse in a hospital who's making, say, $47, $42? What does that do to the culture and the health and well-being?
Nothing positive, because there's a lot of other things. The agency nurses are not invested in the institution. Yeah. They come and go as they please.
Yeah.
If they're working overtime, then all of a sudden that $85 an hour becomes $160.
Yeah.
And you know that the institution is paying double that at a minimum. So all of a sudden, your $45 an hour nurse who is employed by the hospital is costing that same institution $300 or $400 an hour.
Yeah, it's fiscally irresponsible.
Very.
I mean, that's what I made this case to the minister, the finance minister, earlier this week, and I said, I feel like it would be a financially responsible thing to do to repeal Bill 124, to retain the staff that's already, the knowledgeable staff that's already in our system, and to pay them a fair wage. Because it's the retention piece, I think, that is lost in this entire argument. So thank you very much for setting the record straight, and also thank you for coming with recommendations to make this better, because that really is the missing part. My second question is actually to Leanne. Now, Leanne, you've had some success as a new organization, or when you've had some meetings with MPPs, because all of us have had an experience with a family member or friend who's experienced chronic pain. And so it does touch close to home. When you are talking about the government reducing the access to nerve blockers, can you give the committee some sense as to how, if they do this, if they move ahead and they reduce those appointments and those medical procedures, how much more will that cost the system when people have to resort to other avenues for pain relief?
Yes, thank you. So that's a big point here, is that could reduce it from the chronic pain specialist, but it's going to be redirected either to family physicians having to see these patients, or worse, these patients going to the ER. So as stated, the highest billing visit for the chronic pain specialist, if they did a maximum of their injections, which is 8 per visit, plus the urine test and the visit fee, maximum that could be billed in that day is $200.
Okay.
Where the average hospital visit is almost $360 per visit.
Yeah, and you.
Thank you very much. We'll have to finish that answer in the next round. We're now going to the independent MPP Bowman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rachel and Leanne. You were clearly both well prepared, and so I thank you for the time that you spent preparing and for being here today. Rachel, I'd like to start with you. What does the government tell the ONA about why they can't give you more than 1% a year?
They tell us they don't have the money.
They don't have the money.
They find that yet when you have male-dominated professions, they find the money for them. Police, firemen, paramedics, when they're municipally hired, they all get significant salary increases, whereas nurses, which is predominantly female, do not.
So we know they have the money because we see the financial reports, $2.1 billion surplus, $3.5 billion contingency fund. If they have the money and they're not giving you the money, just tell us again what you think it's really about.
Well, it floors me, to be honest. What it looks like is it looks like it's gender biased, but it seems to us that the ultimate motive here is to destroy our public healthcare system and to put into place a private healthcare system similar to that we see in the States. And we all know that is just going to impact our most vulnerable. Our children, our elderly, our chronically ill, our acutely ill, our injured. Those people who need the most care are the ones who are going to be the most impacted forever.
Thank you. I'm going to just refer to the member opposite's comment recently, MPP Triantafilopoulos, who said that we've got your back. This government has your back. What do you feel and think when you hear that statement?
They do not have my back. And I think I could absolutely say on behalf of all 68,000 nurses in Ontario, you do not have our back. If you had our back, Bill 124 would never have come into being. If you had our back, we wouldn't be seeing nurses leaving in droves. If you had our back, you would have listened to us when we put forward the request to meet with you and work together on solutions, both short and long term, to repair the healthcare system that Ontarians so value. You do not have our back.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope they're listening. I keep saying that. I hope they're listening. New statistics released this week show that Ontario's supply of RNs, as you have mentioned, has fallen further behind the national average than ever before. The CIHI report found that the average number of RNs in the rest of Canada has actually increased by 2.68%. with Canada having an average of 830.5 RNs per 100,000 citizens. In Ontario, the average number of RNs per 100,000 is just 668. Your association, the RNAO, they were here yesterday, or they've been at Queen's Park recently. They keep telling the government that Bill 124 is a major cause for that decrease in nursing supply, which is affecting our healthcare crisis, or is creating this crisis. Any other closing thoughts you'd like to share with the government here today?
That is the biggest factor at the moment, because while we all look at the financial impact that it's had on us, it also speaks to one of value. It tells us that we're not valued, that we're not professionals.
Thank you very much.
Degrade.
We'll have to finish that answer in the next round. We'll now go to the government. Mr. MPP Menad.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Appreciate it. And I just want to acknowledge and thank the delegate and the presenters here. My first question is to the Ontario Nurses Association, and I do want to ask a question to the other presenter from the National Chronic Pain Society, though, as well. You talked about that we need a lot of nurses, and I don't know how much we can do as a family, but I want to say this. My daughter is actually going to become a nurse. She's in a grade 12 right now, and she's actually applying for the nursing as we're speaking. And her question always been, Dad, we need to do a little more to educate my peers to go into this noble profession. So can I take a moment to ask you if I'm sure I'm going to take and share this message of yours to her, and if she has to go and talk to her peers, what should she say to those grade 12 students who are planning to get into the profession, and potentially, because we know it's a noble profession and we know that we are in a need of nursing. So what should the message be?
You need to be honest with them. Yes, it's a noble profession, and I would not have done anything else. And I still, despite the crisis we're in at the moment, would not change my career. But it's not a Florence Nightingale career. It's hard work. You see things that nobody should see. I have held stillborn babies. I have held the hands of adults who are dying. And that is a reality to nursing. They need to know that. They need to know that we are not heroes. This is the thing. I am not a hero. We are not heroes. We are professionals. We are educated individuals with 4-year degrees and continuing education after that. But please come. Just know what you're getting into, and know that while it is one of the hardest careers you will pick up, it is definitely one of the most rewarding careers you will ever have.
Thank you so much. In fact, she's actually volunteering at Credit Valley Hospital so that she knows that what she's getting into it, and every time she comes back and she talks good things about how they are able to help. I mean, of course, she's not a nurse, she's just a volunteer, but she sees those wonderful nurses like you. Another thing which that's a bit close to my heart and my home is because I'm a first-generation immigrant, and I get a lot of call from Malton, as you know, is right next to the airport. A lot of the new immigrants, they'll come, and I don't know, for some reason, they'll always say it is extremely difficult to get into. They have an experience of 5 to 10 years. Many of them come from Middle East, and many of those are actually from the American hospitals. But still, when they come here, they say it takes forever to get or become a registered nurse. So is there any suggestion that you can give it so that I can take it back, especially because I'm in the Ministry of Labor Training and Skill Development?
It does. It takes an average of 3 years, and the holdup is the College of Nurses. It takes a long time for them to get their papers together. They are expected to have current nursing experience. Once you come here, it's very difficult to get that because you're no longer licensed, so they have to go back home to get that experience. So there's far too many roadblocks in place. And eventually, because they have to earn, they move away from nursing. They move to something else that they can do so that they can put food on their families' tables. But the primary, it's the paperwork, it's the red tape. These are qualified individuals that sit at home, unable to work. How is that? It needs to be addressed with the college. We need to look at their processes. I know they're saying how they've fast-tracked 1,000 nurses. Well, it's not enough. It's not enough. There's enough nurses, internationally educated nurses out there who would be able to help us with this crisis we have. The estimate is there's 12,000 of them, a minimum, probably more, waiting to get licensed. That's half the problem.
Greatly appreciated. No, thank you so much. I mean, you talked about when you're a new immigrant, what should you do first? Put food on the table today or think about the future? And I'm giving an example. I got a graduate in chemical engineering, but I did not pursue into the profession engineer, and I sometime regret as well, though. So we need to all come together. Thank you for those valuable suggestions. I just want to quickly move over, Chair.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, and I apologize to the member from National Chronic Pain Society. We only have 2 minutes. As we know, Ontario is the most populated province, and we are in conversation to create a national chronic pain strategy. So my quick question would be, as an association, can you please tell us how Ontario can lead a nation chronic pain strategy? Thank you.
I think the number one thing is speak to the right people. I think that the people in the mix of it need to have their voices heard. Patients suffering with chronic pain, they need to be consulted. They need to be heard. They need to be able to speak up for themselves. I think quite often they are not part of any discussions, and I don't know how any discussions can be made without the people directly involved having a say and input.
Thank you. And as an association, can you speak to any initiatives in place to help with the prescriber issues with the pain medication that we are seeing across Canada as of this?
That's exactly one of the reasons I brought forth my concern, is that if the drastic cuts are made to nerve blocks, we are going to take a step back with this problem of the overuse of prescribed narcotics. People will have to resort back to using them rather than having these treatments covered by OHIP. Nerve blocks are not addictive. They don't have any major side effects. People can go back to work. They can, take care of their families, things like that right after. Whereas if they're put back into the system where they need to take narcotics, we all know how that ends. We need to do what we can to keep people off of their narcotics. They're highly addictive. Even the most well-educated people can become addicted very quickly. So we want to make sure that people suffering from chronic pain have these options through OHIP that are not addictive, that help reduce the strain on our healthcare system, help reduce the strain in our emergency rooms on our healthcare providers.
Thank you very much. That
Thank you so
concludes
much.
the time. We now go to the official opposition, MPP Kerrigan.
Thank you very much for your presentations, Rachel and Leanne. I think I'd like to focus my questions for Rachel. You have quite importantly pointed out how Ontario's per-person healthcare spending is the lowest in the country and has been really very unfair to nurses for well over a decade, when we see that other professions are seeing increases. I also wanted to thank you for offering all of the solutions that you've put forward, and thank you for sharing the really disturbing truth about third-year nursing students that many are just considering leaving altogether. We need good people who are strong and have that good caring heart, and it's a shame that people are being pushed away from the profession by this government's neglect of the field itself. I think as well, it's disastrous when we consider all the nurses leaving the profession and the loss of skills that will pose for our future. I want to also thank ONA for coming to Queen's Park today with the other 5 largest healthcare unions to really try to communicate to this government that it is a crisis that they can no longer keep ignoring. Minister Jones, in question period today, said that she's always ready to meet and she's fond of good ideas from the front line. Have you heard any feedback on the recommendations that ONA has made to Minister Jones?
No, because Minister Jones has not heard the recommendations. They have not been able to get to speak to either Minister Jones or the Premier Ford.
So
you can't. you can't get feedback if you haven't been able to provide the information in the first place.
Right. So their claims, the government has claimed that they're always ready to meet, but they have not made themselves available despite multiple requests to meet. Is that correct?
Correct.
Understood.
That's correct.
Yes, and I also wanted to consider your comments about privatization of our healthcare system. Previously, we heard the former Minister of Health, Minister Elliott, indicate that private hospitals would help with taking care of the surgical backlog. And more recently, Minister Jones was attending a press conference in which commitments to not further privatize our treasured public healthcare system were crossed out and never delivered in that press conference. Could you please provide your thoughts about privatization and the dangers that that poses for this government?
It's the worst thing we could ever have. It's been well documented in the States, in particular, them being, and we tend to use them a lot because they are our closest neighbors, that their morbidity mortality rates are far greater than ours are. The cost of their healthcare is the highest in the world because of the private healthcare. It was attempted in England, which is comparable also to us. In 2012, I believe it was, the NHS introduced more privatization, and it resulted in an increase in the morbidity mortality. It did not result in cost savings. It did exactly the opposite. The other thing is it drives your professionals out of the public healthcare system. They don't go, and the private healthcare systems are interested in profit. Ultimately, it is profit that they are interested in. So they're not going to take the sickest. They're not going to take the people with underlying risk factors. They're not going to take the knee replacement who has a bad heart and COPD because they're a higher risk. They're going to cost them money to care for them. It results in people who need the care the most getting the care last because they don't have the user fees that private healthcare companies request or demand. Tests suddenly become, if it's $100 on OHIP, but you can pay $1,500 and jump the queue, then they're going to take the person with a visa, not with the OHIP card. So it means people it increases the wait times, it increases surgery times because now people are sicker when they get in there. You don't have the skilled people within the system because they've moved out.
Right.
So our population don't get the care they deserve.
Understood. And I think it does come down to a question of the public healthcare system and what their mandate is or what the ethos of healthcare should be. Is it there to care for individuals or is it there to drive profits for a few investors? I just wanted to also ask, you'd mentioned in ONA's recommendations about addressing workplace violence. Why do you suppose that the government is reluctant to address this very pernicious and growing threat for talented nurses?
I wish I knew. I really do. But I have seen a drastic increase in the level of violence that is being perpetrated against nurses. And as I mentioned, one of my nurses, one of my members, was almost killed by a patient. And if it hadn't been for the fact that somebody walked into that room at the right time and pried the fingers of the patient off her throat, this would be a completely different conversation. And I wish I could say that was unusual, but it is not. Patients throw things, family members throw things, they are frustrated with wait times, they are frustrated with everything. And I think the current environment, which seems to encourage violence, is not helping. People feel entitled to do. It's their right to do what they want to do. And if that means swinging at a nurse and potentially killing her, they don't care.
It's just incredibly lucky, given the scenario or the story you've just told us, that there was actually somebody there, given the health human resources disaster that is Ontario's healthcare system right now. I'd like to turn over any remaining time to Leanne. I'm sorry I didn't have ask any questions. Is there anything you'd like to add for the committee? Put you on the spot there.
Thank you very much. We're now 15 seconds, so unless you want to utilize that, we will now go to the independent MPP Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for Leanne. Leanne, could you tell us, give us a little more background around a situation or a case that you've seen where a treatment that might not be covered today generated a lot of benefit for someone, and for example, enabled them to return to work, or minimized a hospital stay. I think one of your key messages is that tackling this creates a whole bunch of benefit, downstream benefits, so to speak, right? In terms of people being able to live their best life, return to work, etc. Could you share an example of that kind of story?
Of services, that used to be covered that aren't anymore.
Yes, a kind of service that's not covered that generates a lot of benefit for your clients and patients.
So the biggest one that I would see is the physiotherapy. When patients had access to physio, I know there's still remaining some physio clinics out there. They're not the same quality of care, and not too many people have the benefits of using those clinics. So I think that was a big switch for chronic pain sufferers when they no longer had the access to physio and rehab. We all know a multidisciplinary approach works best for any injury, especially those patients with chronic pain. So having the ability to have a trained physiotherapist, kinesiologist do a physical program with them would just enhance their treatments that they would receive elsewhere. But my biggest concern really is the discussion of the nerve blocks being drastically reduced, because that's where we are going to see the trickle effect and affect every other part of our healthcare system, the emergency rooms, our family doctors, our other medical providers that are already backlogged. They're going to have to now pick up these extra 3.5 million patients that suffer from chronic pain. They're now going to have to turn to those avenues of treatment instead of the nerve blocks and treatments they currently receive in a pain clinic.
Thank you. You talked a little bit as well about the opioid crisis and people turning to that when they can't get their pain treated and alleviated. I'm not sure if you're aware that the RNAO and other organizations are suggesting to the government that they provide increased funding to Safe Supply, to mobile units, et cetera, that can support those with opioid addictions. Do you support that? Do you think that's a good strategy?
I think it's too late at that point. I think that if patients are having to resort to that, there's a time and a place. But if there's other options out there so we don't have to use the opioids, things that don't create addictions, I think that's the better use of our resources and our funding, because like I said, it can be any one of us could become addicted if we've had to deal with chronic pain in a way we don't know how to manage. And, so if we have to worry about adding that support afterwards for those patients that are addicted, it's an afterthought. Let's try to catch it before it happens. Let's have access to other care and prevent
Thank you.
The need for that.
Thank you. And one last question for Rachel. Rachel, I've heard recently about family doctors who are telling their patients, sending letters to their patients saying, we're not going to book any regular physicals or regular checkups because we need to preserve spaces for sick kids who are, again, suffering from viruses, COVID, et cetera. Are you seeing the impact of those kinds of things in the hospital system where, patients can't get treatment from their family doctors and then need to come to the ER as an example?
Absolutely. It's overloading our emergency rooms. They don't, and it's perpetuating a lot of problems because wait times on average are 20 hours, which means most people are waiting significantly longer than that, just to be seen. And that's not to be treated and released. That's just to be seen. So care is not issued. Care is given eventually, but it's certainly not given in a timely manner. And with the shortage of staff in the emergency rooms, it means that if you are not literally bleeding to death, you won't be.
Thank you very much. That does conclude the time for the presentations, and I want to thank both of you for the presentations that you made this afternoon. We very much appreciate the efforts you put in to prepare it, and obviously the fact that you lived through it to get here to. We very much appreciate you going to that trouble to talk to us. We also want to remind the committee this concludes our business for today, and I thank again all the presenters. And want to remind that the deadline for written submissions is 7 p.m. on Monday, November the 28th, 2022. And for the presenters this afternoon, if you have more that you would like to put into the record, you can send in a written submission over and above the fact that you made a presentation. Committee members, the deadline to file amendments to Bill 36 with the clerk of the committee is 5 p.m. on Tuesday, November the 29th of 2022. Are there any questions before we adjourn? Yes, MPB Byers.
We previously had a meeting, I think, scheduled for Monday, but we are not meeting Monday. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Just wondering, what are the dates that the committee will be traveling?
What are the dates we will be?
Yeah, when will the committee be traveling? Do you have those dates for us?
As we sit here today, I don't know of any traveling that we're doing, but in the very near future, we're going to likely be coming forward with a subcommittee report to deal with pre-budget consultations.
Okay.
Whether that includes travel or not would be, we'll wait to see what the subcommittee comes up with.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you, Chair.
If not, again, thank the presenters, and the meeting is concluded.